Alright guys, we're in the shop today trying to check the bearings, make sure everything's good on this trailer. We are going to pull off all the bearings, check them, grease them, reapply them, change any broken parts that need to be changed. Follow along with us here. We'll get started. First thing we're doing here with the trailer still on the ground, or the tire still on the ground, is breaking the nuts free. It's a pretty simple process. I'm going to try to walk you guys through step by step here. So I'm going to jack up the trailer now. And importantly, after I jack up the trailer, I'm going to put jack stands underneath there just as a safety measure. Okay. You gotta put. All right, guys. So we got the jack stands underneath there. We're solid. We're gonna take this tire off. Get the process started. Little pro tip here, guys. Cardboard underneath your working surface. It's gonna save your knees, backs, parts from rolling around. It's also gonna keep your shop floor halfway clean. So. Another pro tip, keep your nuts and bolts and what you're removing all in the same place. Sometimes in order, if you've never done this before, that's a big key. You have everything where it belongs and in the order that it goes back on, makes the process a heck of a lot simpler. So we got the tire off here, pulling the bearing buddy covers off, kind of inspecting everything, seeing if there's any play in anything. So we're going to get the process of getting the hub assembly off of the trailer, clean up the inside, we'll go from there. What we're doing is rubber mallet, slowly working the bearing buddy off. Some trailers have bearing buddies, some trailers have just a bearing protector, and those knock off pretty easy as well. I've done both. I'm switching, this isn't my trailer, this is my dad's trailer, but I'm switching my trailer over to just the regular dust covers. No reason, I just don't ever use the bearing buddies, so we'll get to it here. So we got this bearing buddy off. So you guys can see that grease is a little bit light colored. And you'll be able to see later on when we put the new grease in, a little bit of water has gotten into this bearing buddy. So we're going to make sure that we check out the bearings really, really well to make sure that there's no water inside the bearings. So we're knocking out the counter pin that holds in the castle nut. I always try to keep these pretty straight because I don't have a lot of them in my shop, so, but pretty rarely available at any hardware store. So reverse order here, this is your castle nut that I just pulled off. So if we recap here, we got counter pin, castle nut, thrust washer, front bearing, and the whole hub assembly will come off. We're gonna take a break from here, kind of go up to the bench and clean up this hub, clean up this spindle. Be right back. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna clean out the inside of this hub. You can see all the old grease in there. Good to have plenty of paper towels, a trash can, clothes that you don't care about, and a good pair of gloves. So what we're going to do is clean all this out, clean up all these bearings, and we'll be right back with you. All right, so we got a little bit of this hub cleaned up here. We got this bearing out. Basically what we're going to do here, it's going to be a little bit behind the scenes, but we're going to clean all this old grease off this bearing, make sure that there's no wear, not too much play. Everything spins nice once we get it all cleaned up. Do the same thing. There's another bearing in here. If you guys come over here to the bench, we'll pull this bearing out. I'll pull this seal out. Another little pro tip here, little tool that I picked up, and we'll go over all these tools at the end of the video. But little tool that I picked up, it is just a seal puller. Works pretty simple. Shove it in right behind the seal. Make sure you do not get into the bearing.
Yep, you just went off.
That's okay, Dad.
All right.
And we're gonna pull off this seal. Get grease everywhere because it fell off.
Right.
Little technical difficulty here. But we got the seal pulled off. Fell on the ground. We're gonna match up the seal, make sure we got the right ones. Clean the rest of this inside of this bearing up, our hub up, and clean up the bearing. We'll move on and get to the reinstallation of it.
There you go.
All right, guys, we got all the bearings cleaned up. We got this little tool here. It's a bearing packer. It's pretty simple. We put the bearings in. Put everything together, hopefully here. Tighten everything down. You guys can see why a good pair of gloves works here. We've already done one side of the trailer today, so that's why everything's a little greasy right now for our first bearing that we're packing. But we're just going to push out, what this does is going to push out all of the old grease that's in that bearing and replace it with new. Then I'll come back in and I'll hand pack that bearing to make sure it's fully packed, full of grease, and we'll go from there. So I'm going to have my brother help me here. I'm just going to put a grease gun on here, and he's going to pump it up for me. And just like that, we pushed all that old grease out with new grease, and that bearing is ready to be packed.
I can't see anything.
So you can see the blue grease that came out here. If we look on here, some of that lighter teal colored grease, that grease has had water in it, and we're going to make sure we get rid of that grease. So I'll show you guys how I hand pack a bearing. I buy a tub of marine grease. You put a little bit in your palm of your hand, and you just kind of push it in the cracks on the back side of the bearing, and that just ensures that that bearing has plenty of grease in it, and hopefully a season worth of traveling back and forth to the lake with no worries. This is annual maintenance that we try to do on all of our boats every single year. It's just a precautionary. There was nothing wrong with these. We just drove this trailer about 35 minutes on the road. The bearings were not hot. There was nothing wrong with them, but I'd rather take care of them on the front end. As you guys can see, there was a little bit of water intrusion in there. We'll take care of that by putting new grease in there, making sure everything's sealed up, putting new seal on the backside. We should be good for another season. All right, guys, we got the hub all cleaned up here. We got the rear bearing set in there, got a good layer of grease in there. We're going to put this rear seal on. I'll kind of show you how I do it here. I don't know if this is the right way, but this is how I do it. So just to protect the seal, I get a 2x6. Make sure everything is square. Put a towel over it so I don't get dust or debris in there. 2x6 over the top of it. You can kind of hear the difference when I hit it. That seal is set. Now granted, I've done this a handful of times, so it's not my first rodeo putting a seal in, so it went really smooth. I've had some that you kind of booger them up and you got to go get a new seal. Fortunately, this one went on smooth. The rim and the seal are all even, so there's no difference there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to fill this hub full of grease, put the front bearing back on, thrust washer, kind of that whole array of parts that we had. We got them all cleaned up. We're going to shove it right back on here. Hang out with us for just a second. So you guys can see the importance of gloves here. So what I'm going to do is I got my bucket of grease here, and I'm going to shove all this grease in here and create a nice little coat now that I got that rear seal on there. And that's just going to help fill that hub full of grease. Now, just like not having any grease in your hubs or on your bearings, having too much grease can also be a problem, because when things get hot, what do? They expand. So we want to make sure that we have just the right amount of grease, which for me is, if you can look down through there, it's probably 3/16, quarter of an inch of grease that I have around the inside of this hub. Just enough that the spindle will go in and not push too much out. You can always add more grease once you get everything on, but I like to have, it's just easier to add it from the bucket here. This is the bearing that we had a while ago. Got it all cleaned up, re-greased. We're going to drop this in here. We have our thrust washer here. That sits right on top of here. We got a good seal of grease. We have our castle nut and our counter pin. And we're going to move down to the hub here, or the spindle, and reassemble all of this. Stick with us here. Alright, we're down here getting ready to reassemble all this. You guys saw a while ago, we got everything greased up, we got everything put back together. This is just going to slide right on here nice and easy. Make sure everything's centered up, set well. Brush washers in there. I'm bad about it, but keep your feet out from underneath the trailer. Try to sit Indian style, cross-legged, however you want to look at it. And do not get under that trailer, because if something were to happen here, catastrophic, my jack stand kick out, somebody bumped the trailer by mistake, this whole trailer could fall on your leg, crush your leg, be a bad day for everybody. So I'm gonna put this castle nut on here. And typically for these guys, they're just gonna be finger tight. I wanna make sure everything's set, sealed. See how when I tighten it up, it doesn't spin very well? I'm gonna back that off. There's a little hole right here that counter pin came out of. I'm gonna just make sure everything lines up, spins nice and easy. A hair of play is fine, but you don't want this to have a ton of play. So just snug. Usually snug and back it off just a little bit. Like I said, finger tight. Slide that counter pin back in. Bend your counter key back over. Smash it down. Clean it up. We're going to reinstall the bearing covers here in just a second. So there's no play in there. Spins pretty freely. We got a nice clean hub, new seals. Bearings are all clean. Put this back together and we'll be ready to roll. Alright. I forgot to clean up the bearing cover here. So we got the bearing cover, a little bit of grease on the inside of it, just as a precautionary. It's gonna slip right on here. Bang it on with a rubber mallet. Make sure it's good and set. Paper towels are at a premium today, guys. Just don't tell your wives you're going through all of the paper towels.
You go to Sam's Club and get a whole case of them.
So we got everything set on here. Good and tight. We got our tire. Try not to roll it in the grease here. Just the way that everything came off, it goes right back on. We'll get all these lugs put on, and we'll talk about all the stuff, parts and pieces, the tools that we use today when we finish up here. You can go ahead and turn it on. Alright guys, we got everything wrapped up here. I just wanted to really quickly show you kind of what the tools that we use today in this seal, regreasing, repacking all the bearings. So first and foremost here, any grease gun. I use a smaller one, it's easier to carry in the truck. Good pair of needle nose, Arkansas fits all or crescent wrench. A lot of times you don't need it. Like I said earlier, if they're finger tight, you don't really need it, but sometimes they get stuck on there, so that's good to help get that castle nut off. Lug wrench is what I use. I carry that in my truck. So it's just a tool that I use. Fits my lugs, fits most boats' lugs on trailers. This is a bearing packer. You can buy those at Lowe's, Harbor Freight, pretty well any hardware store. Good pair of gloves just to keep your hands from getting all nasty and greasy. It's easier to clean up. Rubber mallet, you guys saw me using that to set the seal and knock off the bearing buddy. All-purpose marine grease, AutoZone O'Reilly's, one of those two stores. Buy that. I buy it by the jug, and then I also get for my grease gun the individual canisters that go into my grease gun. So kind of just a quick tutorial of what we have, what we use. Oh, lots of paper towels. Like I said, keep those from the wife. The other thing you saw on the floor, cardboard, anything to keep the grease off of you, off of the floor, to help the cleanup. So hopefully this helps you guys out. Don't forget to like and subscribe and smash that thumbs up. Thanks guys.